Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well today. In this video, we'll be breaking down the dark theories behind every South Park character, perfect to fall asleep to or just relax with. But before we begin, I'd just like to kindly ask you all to subscribe. It's completely free and it really helps us improve the videos for this wonderful community we've managed to build. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's begin. First up, we have Eric Cartman. Cartman is a genuine clinical sociopath, and the town of South Park knows it. One of the most disturbing theories about Eric Cartman goes far beyond calling him a bully or a troublemaker. According to this widely discussed interpretation, Cartman is not simply a misbehaving child who says offensive things for shock value. He is a genuine, diagnosable psychopath whose behavior has escalated across more than 25 seasons to the point where he has a higher body count than most villains in fiction. The theory argues that the adults of South Park, and possibly even the other children, are fully aware on some level that Cartman is dangerous beyond normal comprehension. But they have collectively decided to contain him rather than confront him because confronting him is far more terrifying than letting him operate within their small Colorado town. When you examine the canonical evidence across hundreds of episodes and trace the pattern of Cartman's behavior from childhood prank to calculated atrocity, this theory finds genuine support in moments that reveal something profoundly wrong about who Eric Cartman actually is and how the people around him have chosen to deal with it. The foundation of this theory rests on one episode that changed the way fans understood Cartman permanently. In Season 5, Episode 4, titled Scott Tenorman Must Die, Cartman orchestrates what can only be described as a premeditated double murder followed by psychological torture. The setup begins simply enough. Scott Tenorman, a 9th grader, tricks Cartman into buying his pubic hair for $10. Cartman wants revenge. What follows is not a childish prank or an impulsive outburst. Cartman constructs an elaborate multi-step plan that involves manipulating a local farmer, arranging for Scott Tenorman's parents to be shot and killed at a specific location, having their bodies collected and processed into chili, and then feeding that chili to Scott at a public event where Cartman reveals what he has done while Scott's favorite band, Radiohead, watches and mocks the grieving teenager. This is not the behavior of a bratty 9-year-old. This is the behavior of someone whose mind operates on a fundamentally different level than the people around him. The plan required weeks of execution, anticipating multiple human reactions correctly, maintaining secrecy from his friends and the entire town, and experiencing zero remorse during or after the act. Cartman does not feel guilty about killing Scott's parents. He feels satisfied. He licks the tears from Scott's face and declares them delicious. The show plays this for dark comedy, but the implications are staggering when you step back and consider what it reveals about the character. What makes this episode so important to the theory is not just what Cartman does, but how everyone else responds to it afterward. The other boys witness this revelation. They see Cartman feed a teenager his own parents. And yet, by the next episode, they are still hanging out with Cartman. They still invite him to things. They still treat him as part of their friend group. This response makes no sense in reality. If you watched your classmate engineer the murder of 2 adults and psychologically destroy their child, you would not sit next to that person at lunch the following week. But in South Park, everyone moves on. The theory suggests this is not a writing oversight or a sitcom reset. It is evidence that the people of South Park have been conditioned to tolerate Cartman because the alternative, confronting or excluding him, carries risks they are not willing to face. They have seen what happens when someone crosses Cartman. They know what he is capable of. And so they keep him close where they can at least monitor him rather than pushing him away and losing sight of what he might do next. The Coon and Friends trilogy in Season 14 takes Cartman's danger to a cosmic level. In these episodes, Cartman adopts the superhero persona of the Coon and forms a group with the other boys. When the group does not follow his leadership, Cartman allies himself with Cthulhu, a literal eldritch god from the works of H.I.P. Lovecraft who has emerged from the Gulf of Mexico. Using Cthulhu as his personal weapon, Cartman attacks a Whole Foods store, murders the entire crowd at a Justin Bieber concert, sends his former teammates to a dark oblivion dimension, and attempts to reshape reality according to his personal desires. The show frames this as a superhero parody, but the actual events depict a child controlling a godlike entity and using it to commit mass murder without hesitation. Cartman does not struggle with the morality of killing hundreds of people at a concert. He does not pause or reflect. He simply does it because those people annoyed him by liking Justin Bieber. The casual nature of his violence reveals that for Cartman, other people's lives have no inherent value. They exist to serve his purposes, or they exist as obstacles to be eliminated. Kenny, operating as his superhero alter ego Mysterion, is the only character who directly challenges Cartman's alliance with Cthulhu. And Kenny's method of fighting back involves literally killing himself repeatedly, exploiting his own immortality to return each time. Even Kenny, who cannot permanently die, recognizes Cartman as a threat serious enough to warrant sacrificing himself over and over. The fact that the universe requires an immortal being to oppose Cartman suggests the show treats him as something beyond a normal antagonist. He is a force that cannot be stopped through conventional means. Beyond these landmark episodes, Cartman's sociopathic behavior appears consistently across the entire series in ways that the show acknowledges but never fully addresses. He has attempted genocide against Jewish people and gingers on separate occasions. He gave a classmate HIV deliberately in season 12. He manipulated Butters into believing the world had ended and kept him locked in a bunker for days, purely so Cartman could take Butters' spot at a birthday party at Casa Bonita, a Mexican restaurant that Cartman considers his personal paradise. When a police officer later told Cartman he had caused an entire town to panic, lost all his friends, and would be sent to juvenile hall for a week, and asked if it was worth it, Cartman responded dreamily with the word totally. He did not care about the consequences because the consequences were happening to other people, and other people's suffering has never registered as real to him. The show has occasionally attempted to give Cartman redemption arcs, and each one has collapsed in ways that reinforce the sociopathy theory. In seasons 20 and 21, Cartman enters a relationship with Heidi Turner and initially appears to become a better person. He becomes less aggressive, shows moments of vulnerability, and seems to genuinely care about someone other than himself for the first time. But as a relationship progresses, Cartman reverts to manipulation, emotional abuse, and gaslighting. He systematically breaks Heidi down until she becomes a version of himself, adopting his worst traits as coping mechanisms. The relationship does not redeem Cartman. It reveals that when given access to genuine human connection, he weaponizes it. He cannot love in a healthy way because love requires empathy, and empathy requires recognizing other people as real, which Cartman fundamentally does not do. The post-COVID specials, set 40 years in the future, present the most fascinating and divisive chapter in Cartman's story. Adult Cartman appears to have become a reformed man. He is a rabbi with a wife and children. He seems happy, humble, and genuinely devoted to his faith. But the specials strongly imply that this transformation is another long con. When Kyle attempts to change the past and fix the future, Cartman fights against the change specifically because the altered timeline would erase his comfortable life. His devotion to his family appears genuine on the surface, but his willingness to sacrifice the entire world's better future to preserve his personal comfort is quintessential Cartman. He has always prioritized his own desires over everyone else's well-being, and even 40 years of apparent growth cannot change that fundamental characteristic. The specials leave the audience uncertain about whether Cartman has truly changed or merely found a more sophisticated way to manipulate the people around him. And that uncertainty is itself evidence for the theory, because a genuinely reformed person would not leave room for doubt. The adults of South Park have had numerous opportunities to intervene in Cartman's development, and have consistently chosen not to. His mother, Leanne Cartman, is incapable of disciplining him. She gives him whatever he wants, enables his worst behavior, and has never imposed meaningful consequences. The school system, represented by characters like Mr. Garrison and PC Principal, has failed to address his behavior in any lasting way. Law enforcement in South Park is either incompetent or deliberately avoids confronting Cartman. The theory suggests this collective failure is not accidental but strategic. The town has unconsciously adopted a containment strategy. As long as Cartman is attended to, as long as his basic needs are met and he has an outlet for his energy through the friend group and school activities, he remains somewhat manageable. The moment the town attempted to truly restrict him or hold him accountable, he might escalate beyond what anyone can control, and everyone, on some instinctive level, knows this. They let the monster stay in the house because the monster outside the house is worse. This theory transforms every episode of South Park into something far darker than comedy. Every time Cartman makes a racist joke, it is not just offensive humor. It is a window into a mind that categorizes human beings by their utility and disposability. Every time he manipulates Butters, it is not childhood cruelty. It is a predator practicing on the weakest available target. Every time the town resets and forgives Cartman's latest atrocity, it is not sitcom convention. It is a community performing the same calculation that communities throughout history have performed when faced with dangerous individuals they cannot control. They accommodate. They look away. They tell themselves it is not that bad. And the pattern continues, season after season, because Cartman is not getting better. He is getting worse. The only question is how long the containment can hold. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the second Eric Cartman theory, which suggests that his obsessive hatred of Kyle is actually something far more complicated and personal than bigotry. One of the most psychologically compelling theories about Eric Cartman argues that his relentless targeting of Kyle Broflovsky is not rooted in genuine anti-Semitism, but in displaced romantic fixation. According to this interpretation, Cartman's obsessive need to torment, control, humiliate, and be near Kyle is the behavior of someone experiencing powerful feelings they cannot understand, accept, or express. In a small, conservative mountain town where Cartman has been raised on a diet of bigotry and toxic masculinity, experiencing same-sex attraction would be catastrophic to his self-image. So his mind converts those feelings into their most socially acceptable alternative within his worldview, which is hatred. Every act of cruelty toward Kyle is actually an act of frustrated connection. Every scheme that targets Kyle specifically is Cartman finding reasons to make Kyle the center of his universe without having to admit why Kyle occupies that position. The canonical evidence for this theory is extensive and spans the entire series. In the Imagination Land trilogy from season 11, Cartman makes a bet with Kyle that involves Kyle performing a sexual act on him if Cartman wins. Cartman loses the bet in practical terms, but he spends the next 2 episodes obsessively pursuing Kyle to collect on the bet anyway. He takes Kyle to court. He devotes enormous time and energy, not just to winning, but specifically to getting Kyle to engage with him in an intimate way. The show frames this as Cartman being stubborn and petty, which he certainly is, but the intensity of his fixation on this particular prize, the fact that of all possible bets he could have made, he chose one that involves physical intimacy with Kyle, reveals something the surface comedy does not fully explain. A person who genuinely hates someone does not spend weeks of their life trying to force that person into intimate contact. A person who's obsessed with someone, who needs that person's attention and closeness more than anything, absolutely does. Multiple episodes throughout the series feature Cartman kissing Kyle or putting himself in physically intimate situations with him. These moments are always played for shock or comedy, but they accumulate into a pattern that is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Cartman does not seek this kind of contact with Stan, Kenny, or Butters. His physical boundary violations are directed almost exclusively at Kyle. He also demonstrates an intimate knowledge of Kyle's life, habits, preferences, and emotional triggers that goes beyond what a casual enemy would know. Cartman has studied Kyle with the intensity of someone who thinks about him constantly. He knows how to hurt Kyle because he has spent years paying attention to every detail of who Kyle is. This level of attention is not hatred, it is obsession. And obsession, in the psychological literature, shares more characteristics with love than with genuine antipathy. Cartman's relationship with Heidi Turner in seasons 20 and 21 provides additional evidence for this reading. Cartman only enters a romantic relationship with Heidi during a period when Kyle is less available to him socially. The relationship deteriorates specifically as Cartman's dynamic with Kyle reasserts itself. Cartman becomes increasingly abusive toward Heidi in ways that mirror how he treats Kyle, suggesting he is trying to recreate the emotional intensity of his connection with Kyle through a socially acceptable heterosexual relationship. The relationship fails because Heidi is not Kyle. She does not push back in the ways Cartman craves. She does not challenge him intellectually or morally. She does not provide the specific chemical reaction that Cartman gets from his interactions with Kyle. When the relationship ends, Cartman returns to his familiar pattern of targeting Kyle with renewed energy, as if he has been away from an addiction and is finally getting his fix again. The theory also explains why Cartman targets Kyle's Jewish identity specifically rather than any other characteristic. In Cartman's worldview, which is built on layers of prejudice absorbed from media, his mother's questionable influences, and the generally insensitive culture of South Park, Jewish identity becomes the safest container for his complicated feelings. If he hates Kyle because Kyle is Jewish, then his obsession has a rational explanation within his own value system. He is not drawn to Kyle. He opposes Kyle on ideological grounds. The anti-Semitism becomes a shield that protects Cartman from confronting the real reason Kyle consumes his thoughts. Every Jewish joke, every Hitler reference, every scheme targeting Kyle's heritage is Cartman reinforcing the wall between his conscious self-narrative of hatred and the unconscious truth of attraction that he cannot face. In South Park's fictional universe, where the town is small and isolated and cultural attitudes lag behind larger cities, a child experiencing same-sex attraction would have very few tools for processing those feelings. Cartman specifically would be the worst equipped character in the show to handle such a revelation about himself. His entire identity is built on being dominant, aggressive, and traditionally masculine in the most toxic possible interpretation of that word. Admitting attraction to a boy, and a Jewish boy specifically, would demolish every pillar of his self-concept. So his psyche does what damaged psyches often do. It takes the forbidden feeling and inverts it. Love becomes hate. Desire becomes disgust. The need to be close becomes the need to destroy. And the cycle perpetuates itself endlessly because Cartman can never resolve feelings he refuses to acknowledge. The other boys in the friend group have occasionally reacted to Cartman's obsession with Kyle in ways that suggest they sense something beyond normal rivalry. Stan has expressed confusion about why Cartman cares so much about Kyle when he claims to hate him. The show has featured moments where characters raise eyebrows at Cartman's intensity toward Kyle in ways that imply recognition of something unusual. Even Kyle himself has moments where he seems to understand that Cartman's hatred is not exactly what it claims to be. In certain episodes, Kyle engages with Cartman's provocations in ways that suggest mutual emotional entanglement rather than simple antagonism. They are locked in a dynamic that neither of them can escape because neither of them fully understands what drives it. This theory does not excuse Cartman's behavior or minimize the harm of his anti-Semitism. Rather, it adds a layer of tragedy to an already complex character. If Cartman's hatred of Kyle is ultimately rooted in love he cannot express, then every horrible thing he has done to Kyle is simultaneously an act of self-destruction. He is destroying the thing he wants most because wanting it threatens everything he believes about himself. The comedy of their rivalry becomes a dark portrait of how internalized shame and repressed identity can manifest as cruelty toward the very people we are most drawn to. Cartman hurts Kyle because Kyle makes him feel something he was never taught to accept. And the hurt will never stop because the feeling will never go away. It lives underneath every scheme, every insult, every obsessive plot waiting to be acknowledged. And as long as Cartman refuses to acknowledge it, the cycle of cruelty continues. The show goes on because Cartman's internal war goes on, and resolution seems further away with every passing season. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have Kenny McCormick. Kenny McCormick is one of the most iconic characters in television history, recognized instantly by his orange parka, his muffled voice, and the running gag that defined South Park's early identity. They killed Kenny, but beneath the comedy of his repeated deaths lies one of the darkest and most fully realized mythologies in the entire series. The first theory about Kenny suggests that his immortality is not a gift or a quirk of the South Park universe, but a genuine cosmic punishment that has condemned a child to experience violent death hundreds of times while the people he loves forget it ever happened. The canonical foundation for this theory was confirmed in the show itself during the Coon and Friends storyline in season 14. In the 3-part arc spanning episodes 11 through 13, Kenny operates as the superhero Mysterion and reveals to his teammates that he cannot die. He has died countless times throughout his life, and each time he wakes up in his bed the next morning as if nothing happened. Nobody remembers his death. His friends, his family, even the people who witnessed him die, have no memory of the event by the following day. Kenny carries the full weight of every death entirely alone. He remembers the pain of being crushed, burned, impaled, shot, eaten, and torn apart, but he has no one to share that trauma with because the trauma does not exist in anyone else's memory. The origin of Kenny's curse is revealed in the final moments of this arc. After Kenny shoots himself in the head to demonstrate his immortality to the other boys, the scene cuts to his mother screaming in pain as she gives birth. She places a newborn Kenny, already wearing his orange parka, into his bed. Then she turns to her husband Stuart and says with exhaustion and regret, "We never should have gone to that stupid cult meeting." This single line confirms that Kenny's parents attended a gathering of the cult of Cthulhu at some point before or during Kenny's early childhood, and that this attendance is directly responsible for Kenny's condition. The eldritch entity Cthulhu, a being from beyond human comprehension in the Lovecraftian mythology that South Park has repeatedly drawn from, cursed the McCormick family. Kenny was marked for eternal death and rebirth, a cycle that cannot be broken by any means available within the show's reality. What makes this theory so devastating is not the supernatural mechanics of Kenny's curse, but the psychological reality of what it means to live inside it. Kenny has experienced well over 100 deaths across the series. In the early seasons, he died in nearly every episode. He has been crushed by falling objects, eaten by animals, hit by vehicles, disintegrated by alien technology, burned alive, drowned, impaled on flagpoles, torn apart by machinery, and killed in dozens of other creative and horrific ways. Each death is played for comedy. The other boys deliver their famous catchphrase, and the show moves on. But Kenny does not move on. He wakes up the next morning with the full memory of what happened to him. He goes to school, sits next to the friends who watched him die, and none of them acknowledge it. They do not offer comfort. They do not ask if he is okay. They do not even remember. Imagine the isolation of that existence. You are a child who has been violently killed over and over, and the only person in the world who knows this is happening is you. Your parents, who caused your condition by attending a cult meeting, do not remember your deaths either. Your best friends have watched you die countless times and retain no memory of any of it. You cannot seek therapy because no therapist would believe you. You cannot confide in anyone because the confidence would be forgotten. You are completely alone with a trauma that no human being was designed to carry. And every single day you go back to your normal life and pretend everything is fine because there is no alternative. This is Kenny's existence. The comedy disguises existential horror that, if experienced by a real person, would constitute one of the most extreme forms of psychological suffering imaginable. The show has acknowledged Kenny's awareness of his situation in ways that make the horror explicit. During the Mysterian arc, Kenny is visibly anguished by the fact that nobody remembers his deaths. He kills himself in front of his friends specifically to prove what happens to him, and their reaction is genuine shock and grief in the moment. But by the next day, they have forgotten. The grief was real but temporary, and Kenny's permanent pain is invisible to the people causing it. He eventually learns from the goth kids using the Necronomicon that an immortal can only be killed by another immortal, which means there may be no escape from his cycle at all. He cannot age out of it. He cannot find a medical cure. He is locked into eternal death and rebirth by a cosmic entity that operates outside the rules of his reality. The post-COVID specials, set 40 years in the future, reveal that adult Kenny became a famous, eccentric scientist and millionaire philanthropist. He devoted his entire life to researching death and attempting to find a way to stop it. This career choice makes heartbreaking sense in the context of the theory. Kenny spent his childhood dying over and over while nobody believed him. As an adult, he channeled that trauma into science, trying to understand mortality itself so he could potentially end his curse, or at least help others avoid the suffering he endured. The fact that adult Kenny ultimately dies for what appears to be the final time, and that his death becomes the catalyst for the entire post-COVID storyline, suggests that even after decades of research, he could not escape the fundamental condition that defined his existence. Kenny's immortality was never a superpower. It was a prison sentence delivered by an uncaring cosmic force, and he served that sentence for his entire life without a single person truly understanding what he went through. Moving on to the second Kenny theory, which connects his supernatural curse to the most visible and persistent aspect of his family's life. One of the most creative and surprisingly logical theories about Kenny McCormick argues that the McCormick family's extreme poverty is not simply a character trait assigned for comedic purposes, but a direct financial consequence of Kenny's repeated deaths. The theory calculates that if Kenny has died over 100 times across the series, and each death presumably involves some form of funeral, burial, or body disposal cost, the accumulated expense would be catastrophic for any family, let alone one that was already struggling financially. The average cost of a funeral in the United States runs around $8,000 or more, and that figure only covers the basics of a standard burial. Kenny has died well over 100 times in canonical episodes. If even a fraction of those deaths resulted in funeral costs, the McCormick family would be facing expenses exceeding $800,000. For a family living in a dilapidated house on the wrong side of South Park with parents who are both unemployed alcoholics, this level of financial burden would be absolutely devastating. The theory suggests that the McCormicks were not always poor. They became poor specifically because of the endless cycle of burying their son and paying for services that they cannot explain to insurance companies, medical examiners, or anyone else who might question why the same child keeps dying and returning. The show has never directly confirmed this theory, but the circumstantial evidence is compelling. Stuart and Carol McCormick are depicted as alcoholics who live in squalor, fight constantly, and seem barely capable of functioning as adults. Their substance abuse and dysfunction are played for dark comedy, but the theory suggests these are coping mechanisms for the impossible reality of their situation. They watch their son die regularly. They give birth to him again through some supernatural process they do not understand. They presumably deal with the practical aftermath of each death, including potential interactions with authorities, medical professionals, and funeral homes. And then they do it all over again. The psychological toll alone would drive anyone to substance abuse. Add the financial destruction on top of it, and the McCormick household's condition becomes a logical consequence rather than a random character choice. Kenny's poverty also creates a cruel feedback loop that the theory highlights. Because his family is poor, Kenny lacks access to safety equipment, healthcare, and environments that might protect him from dangerous situations. He walks to school in a dangerous neighborhood. His home is structurally unsound. He lacks proper nutrition and medical care. All of these factors increase his likelihood of dying again, which increases the financial burden on his family, which deepens their poverty, which makes him more vulnerable to dying again. The cycle is self-reinforcing and inescapable. Kenny's curse does not just kill him repeatedly, it systematically destroys his family's ability to provide a safe life for him, which ensures that the deaths continue. The theory also raises questions about what happens to Kenny's body between deaths. If he dies and then reappears in his bed the next morning, does the body from the previous death still exist? If so, the McCormick family has potentially dealt with over 100 corpses of their own son. If the body disappears, that creates its own set of problems with authorities who might investigate a child's death and find no remains. Either scenario adds layers of complexity and potential expense to the family situation that would compound over years into complete financial ruin. The show does not address these logistics because it treats Kenny's deaths as comedy, but the theory follows the real-world implications to their logical and deeply dark conclusion. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have Stan Marsh. Stan Marsh has been described as the everyman of South Park since the show's debut in 1997. He is the character most closely based on co-creator Trey Parker, and for most of the series, Stan has functioned as the reasonable voice in a world of chaos. He sees the insanity around him, reacts to it with appropriate confusion or frustration, and often delivers the moral lesson at the end of each episode. But a theory that emerged from Reddit discussions argues that Stan's role as the normal one hides something far more disturbing. According to this theory, Stan is the only person in South Park who is aware that the town exists inside a temporal anomaly, a time loop that prevents anyone from aging, resets events after each episode, and has trapped the residents in an eternal cycle they cannot perceive. Stan knows he has been in 4th grade for over 25 years, and that knowledge is slowly destroying him. The canonical foundation for this theory begins with an easily overlooked moment in Season 4, Episode 2, titled The Tooth Fairy's Tats 2000, Tats. In this episode, Stan has an existential crisis that seems wildly disproportionate for a 9-year-old. He begins questioning whether anything is real. He confides in Kyle that he fears he might not actually exist. And then he says something that the theory considers the most important line in the series. Stan tells Kyle that he can sometimes see time slowing down. This line is delivered casually and the episode moves on, but the theory argues it is the first moment where Stan becomes conscious of the temporal anomaly surrounding South Park. He is not speaking metaphorically, he is literally perceiving the mechanism that keeps the town frozen in time. His existential crisis is not random childhood anxiety. It is the beginning of his awareness that reality in South Park does not function the way it should. This theory connects directly to the most emotionally devastating episodes in the series, the Season 15 two-parter consisting of You're Getting Old and Asperger's. In You're Getting Old, Stan turns 10 years old and everything in his life begins to look, sound, and feel like excrement. Music he once loved sounds like garbage. Movies seem unwatchable. His friends become annoying. Food loses its appeal. A doctor diagnoses him with a condition called being a cynical asshole. The show presents this as a metaphor for growing up and losing the ability to enjoy things you once loved, and it works beautifully on that level. But the theory offers a different interpretation. Stan's cynicism is not about growing up. It is about waking up to the truth of his reality. He has been in 4th grade for over a decade by this point. He has watched the same patterns repeat endlessly. He has seen his friends die and come back, his town destroyed and rebuilt. His family's problems arise and resolve and arise again in identical cycles. The world looks like excrement to Stan because he has begun to perceive the fundamental falseness of the construct he lives inside. The follow-up episode, Asperger's, deepens this reading considerably. Stan is shown to still be depressed. Everything remains unwatchable and unbearable. He rides the bus alone. He sits in class with no interest in anything happening around him. When Mr. Mackey tries to counsel him, Stan breaks down crying and begs for everything to go back to the way it was. His parents divorce. He moves out of his childhood home. His friendships collapse. The show frames this as a realistic depiction of childhood depression, which it is. But the theory adds a layer that makes the depression specific rather than generalized. Stan is not depressed because things are changing. He is depressed because he has realized things never actually change. The same events happen over and over in slightly different configurations, and he is the only one who can see it. Stan is then recruited by the Secret Society of Cynics, a group of adults who also perceive reality as Stan does. They explain that the world is an illusion, and that the only way to cope with seeing through it is to drink Jameson Irish whiskey. The whiskey does not fix Stan's perception. It simply numbs it enough that he can function. The show treats this as a dark joke about alcoholism, but the theory reads it literally. Stan has discovered that alcohol is the only substance capable of suppressing his awareness of the time loop. When he drinks, the world looks normal again. When he sobers up, the horror returns. The episode ends with Stan keeping a bottle of whiskey in his drawer, implying that he has accepted a lifetime of substance dependence as the price of sanity. He cannot fix the loop. He cannot escape it. He can only anesthetize himself against the knowledge of it and pretend to be a normal child for one more day. The theory finds additional support in how other characters describe Stan. Butters, in the episode Going Native, tells the other boys that Kyle believes he knows everything. The theory applies this observation to Stan as well, noting that both Stan and Kyle demonstrate knowledge and maturity far beyond what any fourth grader should possess. Stan's political awareness, his understanding of complex adult situations, his ability to navigate crises that would overwhelm actual children, all of these traits make sense if he has been accumulating knowledge across decades of repeated time loops while maintaining the body and social position of a 9-year-old. He is functionally a middle-aged man trapped in a child's body, surrounded by people who reset every week, trying to maintain relationships that have no ability to develop because the people in them are perpetually frozen. The post-COVID special, set 40 years in the future, provide the most tragic extension of this theory. Adult Stan has moved away from South Park entirely. He works as an online whiskey consultant, which means he has built his entire career around the substance he needs to cope with his perception of reality. He has not spoken to Kyle in years. His marriage failed, his sister died, his relationship with his father is broken. When Kyle calls to tell him Kenny has died, Stan's first response is that there is nothing left for him in South Park. He returns reluctantly and spends most of the specials expressing bitterness, detachment, and exhaustion. This is a man who has been aware of something terrible for his entire life and has spent decades trying to escape it through distance, alcohol, and isolation. He left South Park, but the knowledge of what South Park is came with him. You cannot outrun awareness. You can only drink enough to make it tolerable, and apparently even that stops working eventually. Before we move on, let's look at the second Stan theory, which examines a different kind of darkness. The theory that Stan is slowly, inevitably becoming his father, Randy Marsh. This theory argues that cynicism and self-destruction run in the Marsh family like a genetic disease, and that Stan's character arc across the entire series is not random development, but a deliberate, tragic echo of his father's descent from well-meaning bumbler to narcissistic agent of chaos. The evidence for this interpretation exists in dozens of canonical parallels between father and son that the show has been building for over 2 decades. Randy Marsh began the series as a minor supporting character. He was Stan's dad, a geologist, occasionally foolish but fundamentally decent. He loved his family, worked a real job, and provided comic relief through mild overreactions to everyday situations. But over the course of 27 seasons, Randy has transformed into arguably the most destructive character on the show. He has become obsessed with fleeting trends and abandoned them as quickly as he adopted them. He bought a marijuana farm called Integrity Farms and uprooted his family to pursue a business that served no one's interests but his own. He caused the COVID pandemic in the show's canon by having sexual relations with a pangolin in China. When confronted with this fact in the post-COVID specials, he said with complete sincerity that he would do it again every single time. He locked his daughter Shelley in a barn for refusing to do weed chores, and this neglect contributed to her death. He destroyed his marriage, alienated his son, and showed minimal remorse for any of it. The theory argues that Stan's trajectory follows the same pattern on a delay. Stan began the series as the moral center, the boy who cared about doing the right thing and tried to guide his friends toward better behavior. But as the seasons have progressed, Stan has adopted more of his father's worst qualities. He has become cynical, he has turned to alcohol, he has shown increasing frustration with the people around him and decreasing patience for their problems. In the episode Bass to Mouth, Stan rallies a group of people to fight something he was supporting just moments earlier, which is a behavioral pattern identical to Randy's habit of contradictory crusading. Stan does not realize he is mimicking his father because the transformation is gradual, but the audience can see it clearly when the episodes are viewed in sequence. The show explicitly addresses the idea that Stan is becoming Randy in the You're Getting Old and Asperger's arc. Sharon Marsh, during a confrontation with Randy, delivers a speech that functions simultaneously as marriage frustration and meta-commentary on the show itself. She says it is like the same stuff just happens over and over, and then in a week it just all resets until it happens again. Every week it is kind of the same story in a different way, but it just keeps getting more and more ridiculous. Sharon is describing her marriage, but she is also describing the format of South Park itself. And the person she is describing this pattern to is Randy, the character who has become the show's engine of repetitive chaos. Stan, listening from the other room or absorbing this dynamic through years of exposure, is learning that this is how men behave. This is what adulthood looks like. You chase things, you destroy things, you apologize, you do it again. The lesson Stan absorbs from watching Randy is not how to be a good man. It is how to become a functional disaster that everyone tolerates because the alternative is more disruptive than the behavior itself. The post-COVID specials complete this parallel with devastating clarity. Adult Randy has burned down Integrity Farms, been abandoned by Sharon, and sits alone in a retirement home. Adult Stan has burned his relationships, drinks alone, and lives in isolated bitterness. Father and son have arrived at the same destination through the same path of cynicism, substance abuse, and inability to maintain human connections. The specials even show Randy continuing to belittle Stan 40 years into the future, proving that the toxic dynamic between them never healed or evolved. It simply calcified into permanent dysfunction. Stan became Randy not because he chose to, but because the patterns were set so early and reinforced so constantly that no other outcome was possible. The tragedy is that Stan saw it happening in his father, recognized it was wrong, and still could not prevent it from happening in himself. The show suggests with quiet cruelty that some patterns are inescapable. You can understand them perfectly, you can hate them completely, and you will repeat them anyway because they were written into you before you were old enough to resist. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have Kyle Broflovsky. Kyle Broflovsky is Stan's best friend, Cartman's primary target, and the character who most consistently tries to do the right thing in a town that punishes morality at every turn. He is Jewish, which makes him the focal point of Cartman's bigotry. He is intelligent, which makes him the person most likely to recognize when something is wrong. And he is passionate, which means he throws himself into causes and arguments with an intensity that often leaves him more damaged than the people he is trying to help. The first theory about Kyle argues that his role as South Park's moral compass is not heroic. It is Sisyphean. He is trapped in a universe that refuses to learn, surrounded by people who cannot change, delivering lessons that evaporate by the next episode. Kyle is not the hero of South Park. He is its most consistently punished character, condemned to care about things in a world that has been designed to make caring pointless. The canonical evidence for this reading spans the entire series. Kyle delivers more end-of-episode moral speeches than any other character. He is the one who typically summarizes what the town should have learned from whatever catastrophe just occurred. He begins these speeches with the phrase, "I learned something today," or some variation of it, and then articulates a thoughtful perspective on the episode's themes. These speeches are often genuinely well-reasoned and emotionally sincere. Kyle cares about what he is saying. He wants the lesson to stick. But it never does. By the next episode, the town has reset. The characters have forgotten whatever wisdom Kyle shared. The same types of problems arise, the same types of mistakes are made, and Kyle is left delivering another speech that will be equally forgotten. This pattern resembles the myth of Sisyphus, the Greek figure condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a hill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down every time he reaches the top. Kyle pushes the boulder of moral progress up the hill of South Park's dysfunction every single episode, and every single episode it rolls back down. The show rewards him with nothing for his efforts. He does not accumulate respect or influence or change within the community. He starts each new episode in the same position he has always occupied, with the same level of authority, which is none, and the same ability to effect permanent change, which is also none. Other characters get arcs that alter their circumstances. Randy gets Tegrity Farms. Butters develops Professor Chaos. Even Cartman evolves, albeit in darker directions. Kyle remains static because his function in the narrative is to be the voice of reason that the narrative ignores. The emotional toll of this role is visible in Kyle's character across the seasons. He has become angrier, more frustrated, and more prone to outbursts as the show has progressed. Early Kyle was patient and hopeful. Modern Kyle is tired and bitter. He snaps at his friends more quickly. He gives up on arguments sooner. He shows signs of the same cynicism that consumed Stan, though Kyle's cynicism manifests as frustration rather than depression. He still cares enough to fight, which is what separates him from Stan, but the fights are wearing him down. Every time he argues with Cartman and loses, every time the town ignores his advice and suffers predictable consequences, every time a moral lesson vanishes into the reset, Kyle loses a small piece of the idealism that once defined him. The show is slowly grinding him down, episode by episode, into someone who will eventually stop trying. And when Kyle stops trying, South Park loses the last voice willing to say that things could be better. The theory suggests that Kyle's passion for justice is not just a personality trait, but a coping mechanism for the awareness that something is fundamentally wrong with his reality. Like Stan, Kyle has demonstrated knowledge and maturity far beyond what a fourth grader should possess. He understands politics, economics, social dynamics, and ethical philosophy at a level that suggests decades of accumulated learning rather than 9 years of elementary school. If Kyle shares Stan's awareness of the time loop, or has independently developed his own version of that awareness, his moral crusading takes on new meaning. He is not just trying to make South Park a better place. He is trying to prove that change is possible within a system that seems designed to prevent it. Every speech, every argument, every stand he takes against injustice is Kyle testing whether the loop can be broken through sheer force of moral will. And every reset proves that it cannot. Moving on to the second Kyle theory, which takes the time loop concept to its most disturbing conclusion. A theory that gained significant attention after being posted on Reddit and covered by CBR suggests that Kyle is fully aware he has been trapped in 4th grade for over 25 years. According to this interpretation, Kyle knows his real age, understands that the town exists in some kind of temporal anomaly, and continues attending elementary school as a deliberate choice to protect his friends and family from the psychological devastation of learning the truth. The theory builds on Stan's line about sometimes seeing time slowing down, but applies it specifically to Kyle as the character most likely to have fully processed and understood the implications. Kyle is established as the most intellectually capable of the 4 boys. He is technologically literate to a degree that exceeds any real child. He solves complex problems. He navigates adult social situations with ease. The theory proposes that these abilities are not the result of being a gifted child, but the result of being a person who has lived through decades of repeated cycles and retained the knowledge accumulated across those cycles. Consider the math. If Kyle was 8 years old when the series began in 1997 and the show follows current events and references modern technology, then Kyle exists in a world where nearly 30 years have passed. But he remains in 4th grade. He has not aged. He has not progressed to 5th grade. He lives in a town where the calendar moves forward, but the people do not. If Kyle is aware of this discrepancy, he is functionally a 37-year-old man trapped in the body and social role of a child. He attends classes he has already taken hundreds of times. He interacts with children who are mentally decades younger than him. He watches his parents, who also do not age, repeat the same patterns of behavior without any awareness of the repetition. The theory explains Kyle's infamous temper and his reputation as a know-it-all through this lens. Butters says in one episode that Kyle believes he knows everything. The theory suggests this is literally true. Kyle has accumulated knowledge across an abnormally long lifespan and cannot help but display that knowledge in ways that seem arrogant to people who have only experienced a single cycle's worth of learning. His frustration with the other boys, particularly Cartman, is not the frustration of a 9-year-old dealing with a bully. It is the frustration of an adult who has watched the same person commit the same atrocities for decades and cannot convince anyone to take the problem seriously because everyone else's memory resets. Kyle's anger is the anger of someone who knows too much and can share none of it. The most poignant element of this theory is the loneliness it implies. If Kyle is the only person, or one of very few people, who retains awareness across the time loop, he lives in a state of permanent isolation despite being surrounded by friends and family. He cannot tell anyone what he knows because doing so would either be dismissed as insanity or cause psychological harm to people he loves. He cannot form genuine, deep relationships because the other person's development resets while his continues. He's growing older internally while remaining physically frozen, watching the people he cares about repeat the same mistakes endlessly without the ability to help them break free. Every day is the same. Every lesson is forgotten. Every connection is superficial by necessity, because genuine depth requires shared experience across time, and Kyle is the only one experiencing time's true passage. The theory suggests that Kyle stays in South Park despite his awareness, because leaving would mean abandoning the people he loves to a cycle they cannot perceive. He cannot save them from the loop, but he can be present within it, guiding them through each iteration, delivering his moral speeches, not because he expects them to stick, but because the act of trying is the only form of resistance available to him. Kyle's persistence in the face of guaranteed futility is either the most heroic or the most tragic element of South Park, depending on how you choose to see it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have Butters Stotch. Leopold Butters Stotch is the character South Park fans love most and worry about most. He is sweet, naive, endlessly trusting, and systematically abused by nearly everyone in his life. His parents ground him for things he did not do. Cartman manipulates him into dangerous and humiliating situations on a regular basis. The other boys use him as a disposable sidekick, sending him on missions they are too scared to do themselves. And through all of it, Butters maintains a core of innocence and optimism that seems almost supernatural in a town as dark as South Park. The first theory about Butters argues that this is not just a character trait. According to a widely discussed Reddit theory, the entire show is actually being narrated by an adult Butters to his therapist, and every event we have ever watched on South Park is filtered through the memories of a damaged man trying to make sense of a traumatic childhood. The theory was first proposed by Reddit user Falcotier and has since been covered by Looper, WatchMojo, and numerous other outlets. The core argument is straightforward. Butters experienced an extremely abusive and chaotic childhood in South Park. As an adult, he sought professional help to process that trauma. In therapy sessions, he recounts the events of his childhood as he remembers them, which is to say, filtered through the perception of someone who is innocent, gullible, and trusting to an extreme degree. The fantastical elements of the show, the aliens, the supernatural events, the impossible science, are either real events that Butters experienced and genuinely believes happened as described, or they are exaggerations created by a child's mind trying to process experiences too extreme for a young brain to handle accurately. The evidence for this theory exists throughout the series. Butters has the most active imagination of any character in South Park. He creates elaborate alter egos like Professor Chaos, Mantequilla, and Margarine. He genuinely believes in the identities he adopts and throws himself into them with total commitment. If Butters is the narrator, his powerful imagination would explain why the show's events are so wildly fantastical. He is not lying to his therapist, he is recounting events as he experienced them through a filter of childlike imagination that transforms ordinary dangers into cosmic threats and normal conflicts into supernatural battles. A bully becomes an eldritch god. A bad day at school becomes an alien invasion. A family argument becomes an apocalyptic event. Everything is heightened because Butters experienced everything at maximum emotional intensity. The theory also explains the episodes that do not include Butters at all. In these episodes, the events are stories that other children told Butters, and he is recounting them secondhand to his therapist. This explains why some episodes feel more grounded than others, and why the quality and tone vary so dramatically across the series. The episodes Butters was present for are vivid and emotionally detailed. The episodes he heard about from others are more chaotic and inconsistent, because he is filling in gaps with his imagination rather than drawing from direct experience. The therapist, sitting across from adult Butters, would hear these stories and understand them as the traumatic memories of someone who has failed by every system meant to protect him: family, school, community, and law enforcement. Butters' relationship with his parents supports the therapy framing powerfully. Stephen and Linda Stotch are arguably the worst parents in South Park, which is saying something in a town where neglect and dysfunction are the norm. They ground Butters for every conceivable offense, including things that are not his fault. They have physically beaten him. They once tried to sell him to Paris Hilton. His mother attempted to murder him by driving him into a river when she had a mental breakdown. His father has been caught engaging in sexual behavior at adult entertainment establishments and projected the shame of discovery onto Butters rather than taking responsibility. The Stotch household is not merely dysfunctional, it is actively dangerous for a child. An adult Butters in therapy would have enormous amounts of material to work through. And the show we watch could represent years of therapeutic unpacking. The canonical game, The Fractured But Whole, adds another layer by revealing that the cycle of abuse in the Stotch family is generational. During a sequence where Stephen Stotch is high on cat urine, he has a flashback to his own childhood in which his mother beat him for breaking a rule. The abuse Butters endures is not random cruelty. It is a pattern that has been passed down through the family, each generation inflicting on the next what was inflicted on them. and adult Butters in therapy would eventually uncover this pattern and understand his parents' behavior as the product of their own damage. This understanding would not excuse what they did, but it would provide the context that therapy is designed to offer, a framework for processing pain that seemed arbitrary into something that has causes and origins. The second theory about Butters takes the darkness even further. According to a theory popularized by the YouTube channel Rome Theory and expanded by Reddit user Eat a Silly Things, Butters was the only character who survived the events of the Imagination Land trilogy in Season 11, and everything that happened in South Park after those episodes takes place inside Butters' imagination. The Imagination Land trilogy is one of the most acclaimed storylines in South Park's history. In these episodes, a portal opens between the real world and Imagination Land, a dimension populated by every imaginary character ever conceived by humanity. Terrorists attack Imagination Land, and the resulting conflict threatens to spill over into reality. The United States government decides to nuke Imagination Land to prevent the spread of evil, imaginary characters into the real world. The nuclear bomb is detonated and Imagination Land is destroyed along with everything and everyone inside it. Butters, who had been transported to Imagination Land and identified as the key to saving it, is tasked with imagining everything back into existence. Using the power of his imagination, Butters rebuilds Imagination Land and everything within it. The theory proposes that Stan, Kyle, Kenny, and Cartman were inside Imagination Land when the bomb went off and did not survive. Butters, devastated by the loss of his friends, used his established power to imagine them back into existence. But the friends he rebuilt are not real. They are constructs of Butters' imagination, living inside a reality that Butters is unconsciously maintaining. Everything that happens in South Park after the Imagination Land trilogy is Butters' mind generating scenarios, adventures, and conflicts for the imaginary versions of his friends, because he cannot accept that they are gone. The evidence for this theory hinges on the show's established canon regarding Butters' imagination. The Imagination Land trilogy explicitly confirms that Butters possesses an imagination powerful enough to reshape an entire dimension. He imagined billions of characters and an entire world back into existence after nuclear annihilation. If he can do that, he can certainly imagine 4 boys and a small Colorado town. The theory notes that after the Imagination Land trilogy, the show introduces increasingly impossible elements. Literal superpowers appear in the Coon and Friends arc. Time travel becomes a regular plot device. The boundaries between reality and fantasy become progressively blurrier. These escalations make sense if the show's reality has shifted from actual events to Butters' imagined events, because an imagined reality would naturally become more fantastical over time as the imaginer pushes the boundaries of what he can create. The theory also points to a specific Season 15 episode where Stan's parents separate. This real-world, emotionally grounded event seems out of place amid the show's increasing absurdity. The Rome Theory and the Reddit post by Edo Silly Things suggest that Butters inserted a proxy version of this event into his imagined reality as a way of processing real grief. If Stan's real parents separated before the Imagination Land event, or if Butters is incorporating real-world information he encountered after his friends' deaths, the divorce plotline represents reality bleeding into Butters' constructed world. He cannot keep the fantasy entirely sealed off from truth, and occasionally the pain of real loss manifests as pain within the imagined narrative. The most haunting aspect of this theory is what it says about Butters' mental state. If the theory is true, Butters has been maintaining an imaginary world for years, possibly decades, rather than confronting the loss of his best friends. The show's continuation is not evidence of a healthy creative imagination. It is evidence of a profound psychological break. Butters cannot grieve, he cannot move on, he cannot accept that the boys are dead, so he keeps them alive in the only way available to him, through the extraordinary power of his imagination, creating adventure after adventure for them because stopping would mean acknowledging the silence that replaced them. The show goes on because Butters' mind refuses to let it end. Every episode is a small act of desperate, beautiful, devastating denial. Professor Chaos, Butters' supervillain alter ego, takes on new meaning in this context. Professor Chaos is not just a child playing dress-up. He is the part of Butters' psyche that wants to destroy the imaginary world he has built, because maintaining it is exhausting and painful. Professor Chaos threatens to level the town and create chaos because the real Butters, buried under layers of imagination, knows that the world he has constructed is not real and sometimes wants to tear it all down. But he never succeeds. The imagined friends always stop Professor Chaos. The imagined town always survives because Butters, even in his darkest moments, cannot bring himself to destroy the only thing keeping his friends alive. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have Randy Marsh. Randy Marsh might be the most complicated character evolution in the history of adult animation. He began as a background character whose primary purpose was to be Stan's occasionally embarrassing father. He was a geologist. He wore a button shirt and had a mild manner. He overreacted to things, but in a way that was endearing rather than destructive. Somewhere along the line, over the course of 2 decades, Randy Marsh transformed into something else entirely. The first theory about Randy argues that he is not a comedic side character who got promoted. He is the actual villain of South Park, and his villain origin story has been playing out in slow motion across hundreds of episodes, culminating in the canonical revelation that he personally caused the COVID pandemic. The evidence for Randy as the show's primary antagonist is overwhelming when you examine his trajectory across the seasons. In his early appearances, Randy's conflicts were small and relatable. He got into a fight at a Little League game. He became briefly obsessed with a cooking show. He drank too much at a party and did something embarrassing. These were the mistakes of a fundamentally decent man who occasionally lost control. But as the show progressed, Randy's behavior escalated in ways that stopped being relatable and started being genuinely harmful. He became the kind of person who would upend his family's entire life to pursue whatever interest captivated him in that particular moment, without any consideration for the consequences to the people who depended on him. The Tegrity Farms arc that began in season 22 represents the clearest evidence for this theory. Randy decided, without meaningful consultation with his family, to move them from their home in South Park to a marijuana farm in the countryside. He renamed the operation Tegrity Farms, a play on the word integrity that the show treats with appropriate irony. Randy's marijuana business became his obsession, consuming his time, his attention, and his relationships. He forced his family to participate in the business whether they wanted to or not. When his daughter Shelley refused to do what Randy called weed chores, he locked her in a barn. This detail, which is revealed in the post-COVID special set 40 years in the future, is played relatively casually in the narrative but represents something monstrous when you pause to consider it. A father locked his daughter in a barn as punishment for not helping with his drug business. And that confinement contributed to her eventual death when Stan, in his own act of rebellion, burned down the farm. Randy's response to learning that his actions contributed to his daughter's death is telling. He shows minimal remorse. He does not engage in prolonged grief or self-reflection. He continues living his life with the same forward-charging energy that has defined every obsession he has ever pursued. This lack of genuine emotional response to catastrophic consequences is a pattern that stretches back through his entire character history. Randy has caused enormous damage to his community, his family, and innocent bystanders throughout the series, and he has never truly reckoned with any of it. He apologizes when forced to, makes gestures of contrition when the situation demands it, and then immediately returns to the behavior that caused the problem. He is not learning from his mistakes because he does not experience them as mistakes. He experiences them as adventures. that occasionally have messy endings. The COVID pandemic revelation in the post-COVID specials transforms Randy from a merely destructive character into the show's canonical apocalyptic villain. The specials reveal that Randy had sexual relations with a pangolin while visiting China, and that this act was the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic within the show's universe. When confronted with this truth by his son 40 years later, Randy does not express guilt or horror. He says, and this is the actual canonical dialogue, "Do you understand the butterfly effect? How one small thing in time can affect the entire future? You can theorize all you want on changing events that happened in the past, but I promise you I fuck that pangolin every single time." This statement is played for dark comedy, but its implications are genuinely horrifying. Randy is admitting that even with full knowledge of the consequences, even knowing that his actions would cause a global pandemic that kills millions, disrupts billions of lives, and permanently damages his own family, he would make the same choice again. This is not ignorance. This is not denial. This is a man who has weighed the suffering of the entire world against his own momentary desire and chosen himself without hesitation. The theory argues that Randy has always been this person. The early seasons simply had not given him enough rope to reveal it. Every obsession, every scheme, every impulsive decision was a smaller version of the same fundamental selfishness that eventually produced the pandemic. Randy does not care about consequences that affect other people. He cares about the experience, the thrill, the novelty of whatever he is pursuing in the moment. Other people exist in his worldview as either participants in his adventures or obstacles to them. His family, his community, and eventually the entire world have all been casualties of Randy Marsh's inability to consider anyone's needs but his own. Moving on to the second Randy theory, which examines his marriage to Sharon as the show's most quietly devastating storyline. Sharon Marsh has spent the entire series watching her husband transform from a flawed but loving partner into someone she barely recognizes. The theory argues that the Randy and Sharon marriage is the emotional backbone of South Park, and its slow deterioration represents the show's most honest commentary on how relationships collapse under the weight of one partner's refusal to grow. The most significant scene in the Randy and Sharon dynamic occurs in the season 15 episode You're Getting Old. During a confrontation about Randy's latest obsession, Sharon delivers a speech that many fans consider the most emotionally raw moment in the show's history. She tells Randy that she has been unhappy for a long time. She says that he has been unhappy for a long time. She observes that they both know it and have known it, and she asks how much longer they can keep doing this. Then she says the line that fans have analyzed endlessly. It is like the same stuff just happens over and over, and then in a week, it just all resets until it happens again. Every week, it is kind of the same story in a different way, but it just keeps getting more and more ridiculous. Sharon is talking about her marriage. She is talking about Randy's pattern of adopting obsessions, causing chaos, facing consequences, apologizing, and then doing something equally destructive the following week. She is expressing the exhaustion of loving someone who cannot change and who sees no reason to change because the world keeps letting him get away with everything. But she is also, whether intentionally or not, describing the structural format of South Park itself. The show does reset every week. The same patterns do repeat. Things do get more ridiculous over time. Sharon's speech functions as both character dialogue and meta-commentary, a character within the show articulating the show's own formula and recognizing it as unsustainable. The speech leads to Sharon and Randy separating. They sell the house. Stan moves with Sharon and Shelley to a new home. Fleetwood Mac's Landslide plays over a montage of the family falling apart. It is one of the most genuinely heartbreaking sequences in animated television history. The separation does not last because this is South Park and the reset button eventually gets pressed, but the emotional damage of that moment never fully heals. The audience saw something real between Sharon and Randy in that scene. They saw a marriage that had been dying for years finally acknowledge its own death. And even though the show brought them back together, the knowledge of that scene persists. Sharon knows she is unhappy. Randy knows he is incapable of change. They both know the marriage is sustained by inertia rather than love. And every episode that follows carries the weight of that unspoken understanding. Before we move on, let's talk about Stephen and Linda Stotch, the parents of Butters. A theory that gained traction on the South Park subreddit offers a specific explanation for why Butters' parents are so extraordinarily cruel to their son. According to a post by Reddit user V1K1NG1990, the Stotches are not naturally abusive people who simply dislike their child. They are traumatized parents who have already failed one son, and their treatment of Butters is the result of overcorrecting for mistakes they made with a secret older child who ended up in juvenile detention. The theory points to a background detail in the Season 4 episode Cartman's Silly Hate Crime 2000. When Cartman is sent to juvenile hall after throwing a rock at Tolkien Black's eye, he encounters various intimidating young inmates. One of these background characters bears a resemblance to the Stotch family. The theory proposes that this is Butters' older brother, a child the Stotches raised before Butters was born, who ended up in the juvenile system due to their permissive or neglectful parenting. The shame and guilt of producing a delinquent child hardened Stephen and Linda. They overcorrected with Butters, becoming excessively strict, punishing him for minor infractions, and maintaining an atmosphere of fear and control to ensure their second son did not follow the same path as their first. Whether or not this specific theory is true, the canonical evidence of the Stotch family's dysfunction supports the broader idea that Butters' parents are operating from a place of deep damage. The Fractured But Whole video game confirms that the abuse is generational. Stephen Stotch was beaten by his own mother as a child. He absorbed the lesson that children must be controlled through fear and punishment, and he applies that lesson to Butters with a rigidity that borders on cruelty. Linda Stotch, who once had a complete psychological break and attempted to kill Butters by driving into a river, is clearly someone whose mental health has been overwhelmed by circumstances she cannot control. The Stotch household is not simply a bad home. It is a machine that produces trauma and passes it down from one generation to the next, with Butters as the latest recipient of pain that started long before he was born. Next up, we have Mr. Garrison. Herbert Garrison has undergone more transformations than any character in South Park, and a compelling theory argues that these transformations are not random comedy beats, but a portrait of someone who has never found themselves and fills the void with increasingly destructive identities. Garrison began the series as the boys' elementary school teacher, an obviously unqualified educator with deep personal issues and a troubling relationship with a puppet named Mr. Hat. Over the course of the show, Garrison came out as gay, transitioned to female and became Janet Garrison, transitioned back to male, entered into various destructive relationships, and eventually became the show's version of a United States president through an arc that directly paralleled and satirized the rise of Donald Trump. The theory suggests that Garrison's gender transitions, political career, and increasingly extreme behavior are all manifestations of the same fundamental crisis. Garrison does not know who he is. He has never known who he is. He has spent his entire life trying on identities the way other people try on clothes, wearing each one until it fails to provide the sense of self he is looking for, and then discarding it for something new. His teaching career was an identity. His sexual orientation was an identity he explored and then modified. His gender was an identity he changed and then changed back. His presidency was an identity he adopted without any genuine political conviction. Each transition promises to finally answer the question of who Herbert Garrison is, and each one ultimately fails because the answer does not exist in external roles or labels. It exists in the internal psychological work that Garrison has never been willing to do. The show's treatment of Garrison as a Trump parallel adds a disturbing dimension to this reading. Garrison as president is someone who achieved the highest possible position of authority and identity in American life, and still could not find peace or purpose. He governed through chaos, cruelty, and impulsive decision-making, not because he had a political philosophy, but because he had nothing else to fill the void. The presidency was just another costume. The theory argues that Garrison will continue cycling through identities indefinitely because he is incapable of the self-reflection required to build a genuine sense of self. He is South Park's most visible example of what happens when someone lacks a core identity and attempts to construct one from external sources. The constructions always collapse because they are built on nothing. Moving on to Chef, one of the most important and tragic figures in South Park's history. Jerome Chef McElroy was introduced in the show's first season as the cafeteria worker at South Park Elementary and quickly became one of the most beloved characters in the series. Voiced by Isaac Hayes, Chef served a role that no other adult character filled. He was the boys' trusted confidant, the person they turned to when they needed genuine guidance about life, relationships, and the confusing world of adults. Chef gave them real advice. He listened to their problems without condescension. He was warm, caring, and present in a way that their actual parents rarely managed to be. Chef was not just a character, he was the emotional safety net of the entire show. The theory about Chef argues that his departure and death in Season 10 marked the precise moment when South Park lost its moral anchor, and that everything that has happened since exists in the shadow of his absence. Chef was killed off in the episode The Return of Chef after Isaac Hayes departed the show following a dispute over the series' satirical treatment of Scientology. The show handled Chef's departure by having him brainwashed by a cult and then killed in spectacularly gruesome fashion, falling off a bridge, being impaled, mauled by animals, and catching fire simultaneously. His dialogue in the episode was cobbled together from existing recordings, creating an uncanny effect where Chef seemed to be saying things he never actually said. The theory notes that prior to Chef's death, the boys had a reliable adult they could turn to in times of confusion or danger. After Chef's death, that role was never filled. No other adult character stepped into the position of trusted advisor and emotional support. Mr. Mackey is well-meaning but incompetent. Mr. Garrison is actively harmful. The boys' parents are wrapped up in their own dysfunction. PC principal tries but cannot connect on a personal level. The absence of Chef left a vacuum in the show's emotional structure that has never been filled, and the theory argues this vacuum is directly responsible for the show's increasingly dark and nihilistic tone from Season 10 onward. Without Chef, the boys navigate an increasingly hostile and confusing world with no adult guidance. Their mistakes get bigger because there is no one to redirect them early. Their conflicts escalate because there is no mediator. Their emotional development stalls because there is no one modeling healthy adult behavior for them. The show becomes darker because the safety net is gone. When the boys fall, they hit the ground. And the ground in South Park is very, very hard. Chef's death was not just the loss of a character, it was the loss of the show's heart, and South Park has been operating without one ever since. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we have Wendy Testaberger. Wendy Testaberger has been part of South Park since the very first episode, but the theory surrounding her argues that her gradual disappearance from the show's focus is not a writing decision, but a reflection of something darker about how the South Park universe treats competence. Wendy is, by virtually any measure, the most capable and well-adjusted character in the entire show. She is intelligent, politically aware, emotionally mature, and willing to stand up for what she believes in even when it costs her socially. She beat up Cartman in a fight and won decisively. She challenges authority when authority is wrong. She maintains healthy relationships and demonstrates leadership skills that exceed those of every adult in the town. And yet, as the show has progressed, Wendy has been pushed further and further into the background, appearing in fewer episodes and receiving less development than characters who arrived seasons after she did. The theory suggests that Wendy's sidelining is not an accident, but a feature of South Park's internal logic. The town operates on dysfunction. Its economy runs on chaos, stupidity, and the repetitive cycle of crisis and reset. A character like Wendy, who is genuinely competent and whose presence pushes situations toward rational resolution, is fundamentally incompatible with the world she lives in. South Park does not know what to do with Wendy because Wendy's natural inclination is to fix problems, and if problems get fixed, there are no episodes. Her competence is a narrative threat. The universe pushes her to the margins not because she's uninteresting, but because she is too effective. Allowing Wendy full participation in the show's storylines would mean allowing someone to actually solve the problems that the show depends on remaining unsolved. This reading is supported by the few episodes that do give Wendy significant focus. When Wendy takes center stage, things tend to get resolved in ways that feel definitive rather than cyclical. She addresses the problem, confronts the antagonist, and achieves a meaningful outcome. These resolutions feel out of place in South Park because they violate the show's fundamental structure of eternal recurrence. The other characters cannot solve problems permanently because the show needs those problems to persist. Wendy can solve problems permanently, which makes her dangerous to the narrative itself. The show responds to this danger by limiting her presence, keeping the one character who could actually make things better safely contained on the periphery where her effectiveness cannot threaten the dysfunction that keeps the show running. There is a sadder reading of Wendy's marginalization that the theory also explores. In a town where stupidity is rewarded, where chaos is the default state, and where the loudest and most destructive voices receive the most attention, being smart and competent and moral is a path to invisibility. Wendy does everything right, and the reward for doing everything right in South Park is being ignored. This mirrors real-world dynamics where the people who quietly maintain systems and solve problems receive far less recognition than the people who create problems and attract drama. Wendy is the person keeping the classroom functional while Cartman gets all the attention for disrupting it. She is the person doing the actual work while Randy Marsh receives the spotlight for his latest catastrophe. The show's treatment of Wendy is, intentionally or not, a commentary on how competence is taken for granted, while dysfunction is endlessly fascinating. Moving on to Officer Barbrady, who occupied South Park's law enforcement role for the show's earliest seasons before being gradually replaced. A theory about Officer Barbrady suggests that he was never actually a police officer at all. According to this interpretation, Barbrady is a well-meaning but intellectually disabled man who the town allowed to believe he was their law enforcement officer because it was easier than confronting him with the truth. The canonical evidence shows Barbrady consistently making mistakes, ignoring obvious crimes, failing to understand basic laws, and being generally incompetent at every aspect of policing. He cannot read for much of the series. He does not understand legal procedures. He treats his role more like dress-up than professional duty. The theory argues that the real law enforcement in South Park was always handled by other means, whether through the town's general indifference to crime, the occasional intervention of actual federal authorities, or simply the community policing itself through its own chaotic mechanisms. Barbrady was given a badge and a car and allowed to drive around feeling important because the alternative, telling him he was not qualified and dealing with the emotional fallout, was something the town preferred to avoid. This is consistent with South Park's established pattern of accommodating dysfunction rather than addressing it. The town would rather let an unqualified man pretend to be a cop than have an uncomfortable conversation about his limitations. The gradual introduction of Sergeant Harrison Yates as Barbrady's replacement supports this theory. Yates is presented as an actual police officer, albeit a corrupt and incompetent one by real-world standards. His arrival coincides with Barbrady's diminishing role, suggesting the town finally reached a point where the pretense could no longer be maintained. Perhaps a situation arose that required real police intervention, and Barbrady's limitations were exposed in a way that could not be ignored. Rather than confronting Barbrady directly, the town simply brought in Yates and allowed Barbrady to fade into the background. never explicitly telling him he was being replaced, but simply giving him fewer and fewer reasons to show up. It is a small theory about a minor character, but it reflects the broader theme of South Park as a town that prefers comfortable lies to uncomfortable truths. Next up, we have Towelie, one of the strangest characters in a show full of strange characters. Towelie is a sentient towel who is addicted to marijuana and periodically wanders into the main character storylines to offer unhelpful advice and get high. He sounds like a joke character, and in many ways he is. But the theory surrounding Towelie argues that he is actually one of the most tragic figures in the show because he is a being who was never supposed to have consciousness and cannot cope with the awareness he was given. The show's canon establishes that Towelie was created in a government laboratory as a genetically engineered smart towel. He was designed to be useful, to dry things and assist with hygiene. He was not designed to think, feel, wonder about his purpose, or experience existential dread. But the experiment gave him all of those things along with a practical functionality he was built for. Towelie is aware that he is a towel. He is aware that his entire existence was designed to serve a utilitarian function. And he is aware that the consciousness he possesses goes far beyond what that function requires. He can think about being a towel, which means he can think about how limited and absurd his existence is. He can feel, which means he can suffer. And he suffers constantly, medicating that suffering with marijuana because it is the only thing that makes the unbearable awareness of his situation tolerable. The episode A Million Little Fibers in Season 10 explores Towelie's existential crisis directly. In this episode, Towelie attempts to reinvent himself and find purpose beyond being a towel. He writes a memoir about overcoming his addiction, but the memoir turns out to be fabricated, mirroring the real-world controversy surrounding James Frey's A Million Little Pieces. The episode is played for comedy, but underneath the jokes is a genuine story about a being who was created by forces he did not choose, given consciousness he did not ask for, and left to find meaning in an existence that was designed to be meaningless. Towelie's marijuana addiction is not a character quirk. It is the only coping mechanism available to someone whose fundamental nature is at war with his awareness of that nature. He was built to dry things. He can contemplate the nature of existence. The gap between those two realities is where Towelie's suffering lives, and the weed is the only thing that bridges it. Moving on to Jimmy Valmer, one of South Park's most consistently likable characters. Jimmy Valmer is a boy with physical disabilities who uses crutches and has a pronounced stutter. He is also one of the funniest characters in the show, both within the narrative and in terms of audience reception. He dreams of being a comedian and pursues that dream with relentless optimism. The theory about Jimmy argues that his unwavering positivity and his commitment to comedy are not natural personality traits, but survival strategies developed in response to observing what happens to vulnerable people in South Park. The evidence for this theory lies in comparing Jimmy's treatment with that of other characters who display vulnerability. Butters is sweet and trusting, and he is systematically abused by everyone around him. Pip was polite and gentle, and he was bullied relentlessly before being killed off entirely. Any character who shows weakness in South Park becomes a target. Jimmy, despite having physical disabilities that would logically make him a target, has avoided the worst of South Park's cruelty. He is one of the few characters that even Cartman treats with a degree of respect. The theory suggests Jimmy observed the social dynamics of his town early on and understood instinctively that vulnerability invites attack, so he armored himself with humor. By making people laugh, he made himself valuable. By being the entertainer, he made himself untouchable. Nobody wants to bully the person who makes them laugh because that would eliminate a source of pleasure. Jimmy's comedy career in the post-COVID specials supports this reading. 40 years in the future, Jimmy hosts Late Night with Jimmy, a successful television show. He is one of the few South Park characters who appears to have built a genuinely functional and successful adult life. The theory argues this success is the long-term payoff of a strategy Jimmy implemented as a child. He identified comedy as his armor, his currency, and his path to safety. And he committed to it so completely that it carried him through a childhood in one of the most dangerous and dysfunctional towns in America and into a prosperous adulthood. Jimmy's story is not about a naturally funny kid who happened to succeed. It is about a vulnerable child who consciously chose humor as his defense mechanism and executed that choice with a discipline that the other characters, distracted by their various traumas and dysfunctions, never managed. Next, we have Craig Tucker, whose theory is refreshingly simple compared to the others. Craig Tucker is defined by one characteristic above all others. He does not care. He does not care about the adventures. He does not care about the drama. He does not care about the mysteries, the supernatural events, the political crises, or any of the other phenomena that consume the attention of everyone else in South Park. Craig wants to be left alone. He wants to hang out with his guinea pig, spend time with his boyfriend, Tweak, and avoid being dragged into whatever insane situation the other boys have created this week. The theory about Craig argues that his apathy is not a character flaw or a comedic device. It is the single sanest response to living in South Park. The pandemic two-parter makes this case explicitly. Throughout the episodes, Craig repeatedly tells the other boys that he does not want to be involved in their adventure. He did not ask to be part of it. He does not care about the outcome. He wants to go home. The other boys ignore his protests and drag him along anyway, which results in Craig experiencing dangerous and traumatic situations that he could have avoided entirely if anyone had listened to him. Craig's frustration in these episodes is palpable and genuine. He is a person of normal emotional range, trapped in a world of extreme emotional volatility, and his coping strategy is disengagement. The theory notes that Craig is consistently one of the least traumatized characters in the show. While Stan is battling depression, Kyle is exhausting himself as the moral compass, Kenny is dying repeatedly, Cartman is descending into deeper sociopathy, and Butters is being abused by everyone, Craig is relatively fine. He has a stable romantic relationship with Tweak. He has hobbies he enjoys. He does not appear to carry significant psychological damage. The theory argues this is a direct result of his refusal to engage with the chaos around him. Craig has discovered something the other characters have not. You cannot be damaged by things you refuse to participate in. By opting out of the adventures, the drama, and the cyclical crises of South Park, Craig has preserved his mental health in a way that no other character has managed. His apathy is not the absence of a personality, it is the presence of wisdom. Now for the final theory in this breakdown, we come to the town of South Park itself, and this theory might be the most encompassing of all. A persistent and elaborate fan theory argues that the town of South Park is not a normal small town in Colorado. It is a supernatural testing ground, an experimental zone where a shadowy organization, possibly government, possibly something older and more powerful, tests paranormal phenomena, occult events, and reality-altering technologies on an unsuspecting population. The theory explains every bizarre thing that has ever happened in the show by positioning the town itself as the cause rather than the characters who inhabit it. Consider the catalog of impossible events that have occurred within South Park's town limits. Aliens have abducted residents and implanted probes in them since the very first episode. Cthulhu, an eldritch god from beyond human comprehension, emerge from the Gulf of Mexico and rampage through the area. Man-Bear-Pig, initially presented as a joke about Al Gore's environmental warnings, turned out to be a real creature that killed people and required a literal deal with Satan to contain. Satan himself has been a recurring character, living beneath South Park and occasionally visiting the surface. Jesus Christ lives in town and hosts a public access television show. Death has appeared as a physical being who can be interacted with. The boys have traveled through time using functional time machines. They have visited parallel dimensions. They have encountered aliens, robots, ghosts, demonic creatures, and supernatural phenomena that defy every law of physics and biology. No other town in the South Park universe experiences anything remotely comparable. Denver does not deal with alien invasions. Colorado Springs is not plagued by eldritch gods. The supernatural concentrates specifically in South Park, as if the town itself acts as a magnet for impossible events. The theory suggests this concentration is not coincidental but intentional. Something about South Park, whether it's geographical location, a device buried beneath it, a ritual performed there, or an ongoing experiment conducted by an organization with the resources to manipulate reality, attracts and generates paranormal activity. The residents are test subjects who have been conditioned, possibly through the same temporal anomaly that prevents them from aging, to accept and forget impossible events rather than questioning them. The theory connects to Kenny's immortality by proposing that the temporal anomaly keeping the town frozen in time is the same force that makes Kenny's death and resurrection possible. The cult of Cthulhu that Kenny's parents attended may have been part of the organization running the experiment, wittingly or unwittingly contributing their child to a test of death and regeneration. Kenny's curse is not separate from the town's larger anomaly. It is a product of it. He is the most visible symptom of a condition that affects everyone in South Park, but manifests most dramatically in him. The town's residents' remarkable ability to forget or ignore catastrophic events supports the testing ground theory. After every alien invasion, supernatural attack, or reality-breaking event, the people of South Park return to their normal lives as if nothing happened. They do not leave. They do not demand investigations. They do not form support groups or develop post-traumatic symptoms. They simply reset. This behavior is not normal human psychology. Real people do not forget that aliens abducted their neighbors, or that a portal to a dimension of imaginary beings opened in their backyard. The theory suggests the residents' amnesia is a feature of the experiment rather than a natural response. Whatever organization runs the testing ground includes a reset mechanism that wipes the population's memory of traumatic events, allowing the next test to begin with a clean psychological slate. The residents are not forgetting on their own. They are being made to forget so the experiments can continue indefinitely. The show's time anomaly, where characters do not age despite decades of real-world time passing, fits this framework perfectly. A testing ground that needs to run experiments over long periods would benefit enormously from a population that does not age or die permanently. The subjects remain available for testing indefinitely. They do not grow old and develop the wisdom that might cause them to question their circumstances. They remain frozen at the ages where they are most useful to whatever purpose the experiments serve. The children stay children because the experiment requires children. The adults stay adults because the experiment requires adults. Nobody progresses because progression would introduce variables that the experimenters cannot control. Mayor McDaniels, who governed South Park for much of the series, displayed behavior that the theory interprets as someone who knows more than she reveals. She managed a town plagued by impossible events with a calmness that suggested either extraordinary composure or foreknowledge of what was happening. She never truly panicked. She never attempted to evacuate the town permanently. She never called in federal authorities who might investigate and expose the experiment. Her governance was designed to maintain order and keep the population in place, which is exactly what someone tasked with managing a testing ground would prioritize. Whether she was a willing participant in the experiment or simply someone who learned to work within its parameters, her behavior is consistent with someone who understands the town's true purpose. The theory transforms South Park from a satirical comedy about small-town American life into a horror story about an entire community being used as experimental subject by forces they cannot perceive. Every joke about the town's weirdness becomes evidence of deliberate manipulation. Every reset becomes an administered amnesia. Every impossible event becomes a test, whose results are being recorded by someone, somewhere, for purposes the residents will never know. The show's comedy functions as the mechanism that keeps both the residents and the audience from taking the horror seriously. We laugh because laughing is easier than confronting the possibility that everything we are watching is a controlled experiment, and the subjects do not know they are being studied. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Now we are going to go deeper into some of the broader theories that encompass the entire show rather than focusing on individual characters. These are the theories that reframe everything you have ever watched on South Park into something fundamentally different from what it appears to be on the surface. The first of these encompassing theories argues that South Park is purgatory and every resident of the town is dead, trapped in a cyclical afterlife designed to test their souls. According to this interpretation, the reason nobody ages, nobody permanently dies, and nothing ever truly changes in South Park is because the town exists outside of normal time and space. It is a constructed environment where the deceased work through their sins, their traumas, and their moral failures before being sent to their final destination. The show's comedy is not entertainment. It is the coping mechanism that makes an eternity of moral testing bearable for souls who do not realize they are being tested. The evidence for this theory begins with the show's relationship with death and the afterlife. South Park has featured Satan as a literal recurring character who lives beneath the town and interacts with residents on a regular basis. Jesus Christ lives in South Park and hosts a television show. The personification of death has appeared as a physical entity that the boys have directly interacted with. God has appeared and spoken to characters. Heaven and hell are established as real places that characters have visited and returned from. The show does not treat the afterlife as metaphorical or theoretical. It treats it as a concrete, accessible reality that exists in proximity to South Park. This proximity makes more sense if South Park is itself part of the afterlife infrastructure rather than a normal earthly town. The cyclical structure of the show maps perfectly onto how purgatory is described in religious tradition. Souls in purgatory are meant to work through their sins through repetitive moral tests. They face the same types of challenges over and over, being given opportunities to make better choices and demonstrate moral growth. If they learn and grow, they eventually earn passage to heaven. If they remain stagnant or regress, they continue cycling through tests indefinitely. South Park's characters face the same types of moral challenges in episode after episode. They are presented with opportunities to be kind, to be honest, to put others before themselves, and to resist the temptations of selfishness and cruelty. And episode after episode, they fail. The reset at the end of each episode is not a sitcom convention. It is purgatory wiping the slate clean and preparing the next test. Each character's specific sins correspond to the types of tests they face most frequently. Cartman, whose primary sin is cruelty, is constantly placed in situations that test his capacity for empathy and compassion. He fails every time, which is why his tests become increasingly extreme as purgatory escalates the challenges to match his resistance. Randy, whose primary sin is selfishness, faces tests that require him to put his family before his personal desires. He fails every time, and his obsessions become more destructive with each cycle. Stan, whose primary sin might be cynicism or despair, faces tests that require him to maintain hope and connection in a world that seems designed to crush both. His failure manifests as alcoholism and emotional withdrawal. Kenny, whose situation is unique, faces the most literal version of purgatory's cycle, dying and being reborn repeatedly in a pattern that only he can perceive. The theory explains why the children of South Park never age. In purgatory, souls exist outside of linear time. They do not grow older because aging is a property of living bodies, and these souls are no longer alive. They appear as they were at some significant moment in their existence, frozen at the age when they died, or when their most defining moral state crystallized. The boys appear as fourth graders because that is the age at which their souls entered purgatory, whether through individual deaths or through some collective event that killed the entire town. The adults appear at their current ages for the same reason. Everyone is locked into the form they held when they crossed from life to death, and they will remain in that form until purgatory releases them. The town's physical properties support this interpretation. Buildings in South Park have been destroyed and rebuilt countless times without explanation. The geography of the town shifts to accommodate whatever plot the episode requires, with locations appearing and disappearing without continuity. The weather, while consistently cold, sometimes changes dramatically within a single episode. These spatial and environmental inconsistencies make no sense in a real town, but make perfect sense in a constructed afterlife environment that reshapes itself according to the needs of the moral tests being administered. Purgatory provides whatever setting is necessary for the current trial and reconfigures itself when the trial is over. God's appearances in South Park support the purgatory theory in a specific way. When God appears, he is depicted as a small, odd-looking creature rather than the traditional image of a bearded man. His appearance seems designed to test the character's faith and ability to see beyond surface appearances. In a purgatory context, God's unusual form serves as a deliberate test. Can the souls of South Park recognize the divine even when it does not match their expectations? Their reactions to God's appearance reveal their spiritual state. Those who accept God's form demonstrate openness and humility. Those who reject or mock it demonstrate the pride and judgment that keep them trapped in purgatory. The show treats these encounters as comedy, but the comedy could be purgatory's way of making tests feel lighter than they actually are. Satan's role in this framework is equally telling. Satan in South Park is depicted not as a terrifying figure of pure evil, but as an emotionally vulnerable, somewhat sympathetic character who has relationships, insecurities, and genuine feelings. He has been killed in the show's canon by Man-Bear-Pig. His characterization in South Park is complex rather than straightforward, which is unusual for a figure traditionally presented as the ultimate antagonist. In Purgatory, Satan's complexity makes sense because he is not there to tempt souls toward damnation through obvious evil. He is there to test them through moral ambiguity. Souls who can see past simple categories of good and evil and engage with moral complexity are closer to passing their tests than souls who see the world in black and white. Satan's sympathetic portrayal is itself a test of the residents' moral sophistication. The show's willingness to address real-world events while maintaining its frozen timeline creates an interesting paradox that the purgatory theory resolves. South Park references current technology, politics, and cultural events despite its characters never aging. The purgatory interpretation suggests that the afterlife is not sealed off from the living world. Information about current events filters into purgatory and is incorporated into the moral tests. The testing ground updates its scenarios to remain relevant, using current events as the raw material for new trials. This is why the boys can reference smartphones and social media despite being eternally 9 years old. Purgatory is using modern situations to test timeless moral questions, moving on to another encompassing theory, which offers a gentler but equally fascinating reframing of the show. According to this interpretation, everything in South Park is real, but we are seeing it through the massively exaggerated perspective of children. This theory argues that the fantastical elements of South Park are not literally happening as depicted. Instead, they are the normal events of a small Colorado town being filtered through the imaginations of children who see everything in extreme, dramatic terms. Kenny dying is actually just Kenny getting hurt frequently, and the other boy's reaction, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny," is the kind of hyperbolic response that children have to situations adults would recognize as minor. A schoolyard argument becomes a cosmic battle. A weird neighbor becomes a supernatural entity. A local dispute becomes an apocalyptic event. The children of South Park experience reality through the amplification filter of childhood imagination, and what we watch on screen is their version of events rather than an objective recording. The evidence for this theory lies in how adults and children perceive the same events differently in the real world. Children have limited frames of reference for evaluating threats, social dynamics, and authority. A thunderstorm that an adult barely notices can feel like the end of the world to a 5-year-old. A teacher who raises their voice becomes a terrifying monster in a child's memory. The embarrassment of a minor social mistake becomes a life-altering catastrophe. Children lack the context to properly scale their experiences, so everything registers at maximum emotional intensity. If South Park is depicting childhood memories filtered through this amplification effect, the supernatural elements become understandable as the children's interpretive framework applied to mundane events. Kenny's deaths are perhaps the clearest application of this theory. Kenny comes from a poor family, he lives in a dangerous neighborhood, his home is structurally unsound, and his parents are negligent. It is entirely plausible that the real Kenny gets hurt frequently, visits the hospital often, and has had numerous close calls that his friends interpret with childlike dramatic gravity as actual deaths. When they say they killed Kenny, they might be expressing genuine fear about their friend's well-being, amplified through the lens of children who do not fully understand the difference between serious injury and death. Kenny's returns the next day are simply him showing up at school after treatment, and the boy's lack of comment about his previous death reflects the normal childhood pattern of moving on from yesterday's drama without reflection. Cartman's behavior becomes more explainable through this lens as well. A child bully who says offensive things and acts selfishly is a common and real phenomenon. But viewed through the eyes of his classmates, that bully takes on monstrous proportions. Cartman probably did not literally feed a teenager his parents in Chile, but he might have done something deeply cruel to an older kid, and the children's retelling of that event, inflated by their shock and their developing moral understanding, transformed a disturbing but earthly act of childhood cruelty into the legendary horror of Scott Tenorman Must Die. The story grew in the telling, as childhood stories always do, until the real event, and the legendary version became indistinguishable. The theory explains the show's inconsistency and continuity errors as natural features of childhood memory. Children do not remember events in perfect chronological order. They mix up details, conflate separate events, and fill in gaps with imagination. If multiple children are contributing to the narrative, as the multiple narrator variant of this theory suggests, the inconsistencies multiply because each child remembers events differently. One child's version of Tuesday contradicts another child's version because they experienced Tuesday from different vantage points and processed it through different emotional filters. The show's loose continuity is not sloppy writing, it is accurate representation of how childhood memory actually functions. This theory does not diminish South Park's themes or emotional impact. If anything, it adds poignancy by suggesting that underneath the impossible events and absurdist comedy are real children dealing with real problems, real fears, real confusion about the adult world, and real pain that they can only express through the exaggerated language of their imaginations. When Stan sees everything as excrement after his 10th birthday, maybe he really did become depressed, and his depression really did make everything seem unbearable. The show just depicts his internal experience through the literal visual metaphor of a child who does not have the vocabulary to describe clinical depression, but knows that everything feels terrible. There is another theory that connects two specific characters in a way that adds unsettling depth to both. This theory proposes that Cartman and Kenny share a psychic link created by their mutual connection to Cthulhu's influence, and that Cartman's ability to channel Kenny's spirit, which the show has depicted on at least one occasion, is evidence of a supernatural bond between them that neither fully understands. The canonical basis for this theory comes from the Season 6 episode A Ladder to Heaven. After Kenny's death at the end of Season 5, the boys discover that Kenny was cremated and his ashes placed in an urn. Through a series of events, Cartman ends up drinking Kenny's ashes mixed into chocolate milk. After consuming the ashes, Cartman begins channeling Kenny's spirit. He speaks in Kenny's voice, exhibits Kenny's personality traits, and appears to be genuinely possessed by his dead friend. The show plays this for comedy and eventually moves past it, but the theory argues that the event established a permanent connection between Cartman and Kenny that explains several otherwise puzzling elements of their relationship. Cartman was the one who allied with Cthulhu in the Coon and Friends arc. Kenny's immortality is linked to the cult of Cthulhu. Both characters have direct ties to the same cosmic entity, which the theory suggests created a resonance between them that the chocolate milk ingestion made physical. After consuming Kenny's ashes, Cartman absorbed a fragment of whatever Cthulhu-derived power gives Kenny his immortality. This would explain why Cartman seems almost supernaturally lucky in his schemes, why he survives situations that should logically kill him, and why he possesses an uncanny ability to predict and manipulate the behavior of people around him. He is not just a clever sociopath, he is a clever sociopath, with a trace of eldritch power running through him, absorbed from the ashes of the one person in South Park who is genuinely connected to forces beyond human comprehension. The theory also explains why Cartman was specifically chosen, or chose himself, to ally with Cthulhu. The entity recognized something familiar in Cartman, the fragment of cosmic energy he absorbed from Kenny's remains. Cthulhu does not ally with random humans. He allied with Cartman because Cartman carried a piece of the power that Cthulhu had already placed in the world through Kenny. The two boys are linked through Cthulhu whether they know it or not, and the link manifests differently in each of them. In Kenny, it creates immortality and suffering. In Cartman, it creates cunning and invulnerability. They are two sides of the same eldritch coin. One cursed with death he cannot escape, and the other blessed with survival he does not deserve. Now let us talk about the Marsh family as a whole, because several theories intersect to paint a picture of this family that is arguably the most complete and devastating character arc in the entire series. The Marsh family represents the American family in miniature. Randy is the father who started with good intentions and lost himself in a series of increasingly destructive obsessions. Sharon is the mother who recognized the dysfunction years before anyone else, but lacked the support or the certainty to walk away. Stan is the son who inherited his father's worst tendencies while retaining enough of his mother's clarity to recognize what was happening to him. Shelley is the daughter whose anger at the world was the most honest emotional response in the household. And Grandpa Marvin is the family elder who has been asking to die since the first season, a man so exhausted by the cycle of disappointment and repetition that death seems preferable to another generation of the same mistakes. The post-COVID specials bring the Marsh family arc to its bleakest conclusion. Sharon is dead. Shelley is dead, killed in a fire at Tegrity Farms that Stan caused by burning down the property his father had built against the family's wishes. Randy is alone in a retirement home, still blaming everyone except himself for the state of his life. Stan is alone in a city apartment, drinking whiskey to cope with a cynicism that started in 4th grade and never left. The family that began the series as a recognizable, relatable American household has been completely destroyed, and the destruction can be traced directly to Randy's inability to prioritize his family over his impulses and Stan's inability to break the pattern he inherited. The theory that runs through all of this is that the Marsh family was doomed from the moment Randy stopped being a geologist and started being a character. When the show began using Randy as a vehicle for social satire, giving him a new obsession every few episodes to parody whatever cultural phenomenon was trending at the time, it inadvertently destroyed the family structure that anchored the show's emotional core. Randy became funny by becoming destructive, and the cost of that comedy was his marriage, his children, and eventually his soul. Sharon's speech about the same stuff happening over and over is not just meta-commentary on the show's format. It is the most articulate diagnosis of a family in crisis that the show has ever produced. She saw it, she said it, and nothing changed because nothing ever changes in South Park. The boulder rolls back down the hill. The cycle begins again, and the Marsh family pays the price for the audience's entertainment, one reset at a time. And those are the dark theories behind every South Park character. Whether Trey Parker and Matt Stone intended any of these interpretations does not change the fact that over 27 seasons and multiple feature-length specials of canonical evidence support them in ways that are difficult to dismiss. South Park has always hidden profound darkness underneath its crude humor, its paper-cut-out animation, and its willingness to mock everything and everyone without restraint. The show has given us a town where children do not age, where death is temporary, where reality bends to serve whatever story needs to be told, and where the same patterns repeat endlessly without anyone learning or growing. These are not just the conventions of an animated sitcom. They are the building blocks of theories that, once you see them, transform the show from a comedy into something far more haunting. Every time Kenny dies and nobody remembers, we are watching a child suffer in isolation. Every time Cartman manipulates someone and faces no consequences, we are watching a community enable a monster because confronting him is too frightening. Every time Stan delivers a moral lesson that evaporates by the next episode, we are watching someone push a boulder up a hill he knows will never stay at the top. Every time Butters forgives the people who abuse him, we are watching someone choose love over self-preservation because love is the only thing keeping his reality intact. Every time Randy chases a new obsession and destroys a piece of his family in the process, we are watching the American dream consume itself in real time. The show goes on because South Park goes on. The characters do not escape because the format does not allow escape. The theories persist because the evidence keeps accumulating. Season after season, episode after episode, joke after joke. And underneath every laugh, if you listen carefully enough, you can hear the sound of something that is not comedy at all. It is the sound of characters trapped in a world that was built to keep them exactly where they are, forever, with no way out, and no one coming to save them. The snow keeps falling, the bus keeps arriving, the boys keep walking to school. And the darkness underneath the laughter keeps growing, one episode at a time, waiting for someone to finally look down and see what the show has been standing on all along. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Before we reach the end, there are a few more characters and connections worth exploring that add depth to the theories we have already covered. Tweak, and Craig Tucker's relationship is one of the most unexpected and enduring storylines in South Park's history, and a theory surrounding it argues that their relationship was willed into existence by the town itself rather than being a natural emotional development between two people. In the season 19 episode Tweak x Craig, the girls in the class begin drawing fan art depicting Tweak and Craig as a romantic couple. The boys protest, insisting they are not gay, but the pressure from their classmates, their families, and the entire community gradually pushes them into acting as a couple. The twist is that by the end of the episode, Tweak and Craig appear to have developed genuine feelings for each other. What began as a social construct became real. The theory asks a deeply unsettling question about this arc. Did Tweak and Craig actually fall in love? Or were they conditioned into a relationship by collective social pressure until they could no longer distinguish between genuine emotion and the performance everyone expected of them? The show seems to answer this question by depicting them as a happy, stable couple in subsequent seasons and in the post-COVID specials. They appear content, they appear genuinely connected, but the theory notes that the foundation of their relationship is not organic attraction or shared emotional discovery. It is community coercion. The town decided these two boys were a couple, and the boys eventually complied. Whether that compliance produced real love or simply produced a convincing performance of real love is a question the show never definitively answers, and the ambiguity is itself disturbing. If their love is genuine, it was born from a deeply problematic process that denied both boys the agency to discover their own identities on their own terms. If their love is a performance they have committed to so thoroughly that they believe it themselves, then Tweak and Craig are living inside a shared delusion that the entire town reinforces because the town needs them to be a couple. Either way, the theory suggests that Tweak and Craig's relationship is not the wholesome love story it appears to be on the surface. It is a case study in how communities can construct identities for individuals and how those individuals can internalize constructions until they become indistinguishable from truth. The Goth kids occupy a unique space in South Park that a theory interprets as the only honest response to living in the town. The Goths dress in black, listen to depressing music, sit behind the school and smoke cigarettes, and refuse to participate in any mainstream activity or social structure. They are dismissive of everything and everyone. They view the other children as conformists and the adults as hopeless. They have constructed an entire identity around rejection of the world they live in. The theory argues that the Goths are not simply performing teenage angst. They are the characters who have come closest to perceiving the true nature of South Park's reality and have responded by withdrawing from participation in a system they recognize as broken. The Goths have been involved in storylines that touch on the supernatural and the occult more than almost any other non-main characters. They played a significant role in the Coon and Friends arc, where they possess knowledge from the Necronomicon about immortality and the forces of Cthulhu. They are consistently depicted as having access to esoteric knowledge that other characters lack. The theory proposes that the Goths' dark aesthetic and nihilistic worldview are not affectations but reflections of genuine insight into the nature of their reality. They have glimpsed the same truth that Stan confronted during his cynicism arc, the truth that South Park is a place where nothing changes, nothing matters, and the cycle never ends. Unlike Stan, who tried to fight this truth and was broken by it, the Goths accepted it and adapted their lives accordingly. They do not try to change South Park. They do not participate in its delusions. They sit behind the school, acknowledge that everything is meaningless, and find community with the only other people who see what they see. Henrietta Biggle, the female Goth, is particularly significant in this reading. She is the one who provides Mysterion with information about immortality from the Necronomicon. She possesses knowledge about cosmic forces that should be far beyond a child's understanding. The theory suggests Henrietta's access to this knowledge is evidence that the Goths have been studying the true nature of South Park's reality, possibly for a long time, accumulating understanding about the forces that trap the town in its cycle. They are not simply sad teenagers. They are researchers of the dark truth that underlies their existence, and their withdrawal from normal life is not depression, but a rational response to what they have learned. PC Principle, introduced in Season 19, adds another layer to the theories about South Park's power structures. The theory surrounding PC Principle argues that he represents the most sophisticated form of control the town has ever experienced, because he enforces conformity not through traditional authority, but through social pressure and the threat of moral judgment. Previous authority figures in South Park, like Mr. Garrison or Officer Barbrady, were obviously incompetent and easily circumvented. PC Principle is competent, physically imposing, and armed with a moral framework that makes resistance feel like moral failure. The theory suggests that if South Park is a testing ground or purgatory, PC Principle's arrival represents an evolution in the testing methodology. Previous tests relied on chaos and temptation. PC Principle introduces tests based on social conformity and the suppression of honest expression. The residents must navigate a world where saying the wrong thing carries severe consequences, which is a different kind of moral test than the supernatural disasters they usually face. The fact that PC Principle has remained a permanent character since Season 19, unlike most antagonists who come and go, suggests his function in the show is fundamental rather than temporary. He has become part of the infrastructure of South Park, an embedded authority figure who shapes the behavior of every character around him. The theory notes that PC Principle's relationship with Strong Woman and their PC babies represent something new in South Park, the creation of a next generation born within the testing ground. If the PC babies are being raised within the system from birth, they will never know anything different. They will never question the moral framework they inherit because it is the only framework they have ever experienced. This represents the testing ground, reaching a new level of sophistication, producing subjects who do not need to be conditioned because they are conditioned from the moment they are born. Returning to the Marsh family one final time, there is a theory that connects Randy's behavior across the entire series into a single coherent decline that the show has been documenting with the patience and detail of a longitudinal study. The theory suggests that Randy Marsh is not a character who is flanderized for comedy. He is a character who is always heading toward destruction, and the show simply revealed his trajectory in the same slow-motion way that real human decline occurs. In the earliest seasons, Randy's flaws were minor and recognizable. He drank a little too much. He overreacted to his children's problems. He occasionally embarrassed himself in public. These are the flaws of a normal man, the kind of flaws that everyone has and most people manage without catastrophic consequences. But the theory traces how each of these small flaws grew incrementally, season by season, until they became defining characteristics rather than occasional lapses. His drinking went from social to habitual to dependent. His overreactions went from embarrassing to destructive to dangerous. His tendency to adopt new interests went from endearing to obsessive to all-consuming. None of these transitions happened overnight. They happened gradually, the way real addiction and real narcissism develop in real people. One drink becomes two. Two become a bottle. A bottle becomes a lifestyle. A hobby becomes an obsession. An obsession becomes an identity. An identity built on obsession consumes everything around it. The theory argues that Randy's decline is the show's most realistic and most important storyline because it depicts how an ordinary person becomes extraordinary in their capacity for destruction. Randy did not start as a villain. He started as a dad. He became a villain through thousands of small choices, each one slightly worse than the last. Each one enabled by a community that found his behavior entertaining rather than alarming. The people of South Park laughed at Randy's antics the same way the audience laughs at them. And in laughing, both the characters and the viewers gave Randy permission to escalate. The comedy was the enabling mechanism. Every laugh told Randy that his behavior was acceptable, even admirable. So he went further, and further, and further, until he was having sex with pangolins and causing global pandemics, and showing no remorse because remorse requires the recognition that you have done something wrong, and nothing in Randy's experience has ever consistently told him his behavior was wrong. The town laughed, the audience laughed, and Randy kept going. This is perhaps the most disturbing theory of all because it does not require supernatural elements or purgatory or time loops to function. It simply requires the observation that in South Park, as in real life, communities enable the people who entertain them. We tolerate destructive behavior when it is funny. We excuse moral failures when the person committing them is charming. We reset our expectations every week, forgetting last week's damage because this week's spectacle is more immediate and more entertaining. South Park is a mirror held up not just to American culture, but to the audience watching it. The show has spent over 25 years showing us characters who refuse to learn, refuse to grow, and refuse to face consequences. And we have spent over 25 years watching it and laughing and coming back for more. The theories are not about the characters. They are about us, about what we find funny, about what we choose to tolerate, about the darkness we are willing to sit with as long as it makes us laugh. The snow keeps falling on South Park. The boys walk to the bus stop in their colored hats, their breath visible in the cold mountain air. Kenny's hood is pulled tight. Cartman is already talking about something terrible. Kyle is already preparing to argue. Stan is already tired. And somewhere underneath the comedy, underneath the crude animation and the profanity and the cultural satire, the darker story continues. The story of a town that cannot change, the story of children who cannot grow, the story of a world where the same mistakes are made and the same lessons are ignored, and the same suffering is endured over and over and over without end, without resolution, without hope of anything different. The theories see it, the characters, if they could step outside themselves for one moment, would see it too, but they cannot. And so the show goes on, and on, until someone finally finds the strength to turn it off and sit in the silence where the laughter used to be. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. There is one more character who deserves mention before we truly close this breakdown, and that is Pip Pirrup. Pip is a character the show killed off permanently in the Season 14, Episode 201, and his death serves as a cautionary tale that reinforces nearly every theory we have discussed tonight. Pip was polite. Pip was gentle. Pip was kind in a town that punished kindness. He was bullied relentlessly from the moment he appeared, and unlike Butters, who developed coping mechanisms and alter egos to survive, Pip had no defense. He absorbed the cruelty directed at him without armor, without humor, without withdrawal. He was simply a good person in a bad place, and the show killed him without ceremony because good people without defenses do not survive in South Park. Pip's death is significant to the broader theories because it establishes a rule that operates beneath the show's comedy. The rule is simple and brutal. Vulnerability without strategy is fatal in South Park. Kenny survives because his immortality forces the universe to bring him back. Butters survives because his imagination creates worlds where he has power. Jimmy survives because his comedy makes him socially valuable. Craig survives because his apathy makes him a smaller target. Pip had none of these defenses. He had only his decency, and decency alone is not enough. The show demonstrated through Pip's permanent death that the forces operating in South Park, whether you interpret them as purgatory, a testing ground, a time loop, or simply the cold logic of a satirical universe, do not reward goodness for its own sake. They reward adaptation. They reward strategy. They reward the ability to find some mechanism, however damaged or imperfect, for surviving in a world that is actively trying to break you. This leads to a broader reflection on what all of these theories share at their core. Every theory we have explored tonight, regardless of the specific supernatural or psychological framework it proposes, shares a single unifying insight. The characters of South Park are trapped. They are trapped in a town they cannot leave, in bodies that do not age, in patterns they cannot break, in relationships they cannot fully escape. The specific nature of the trap varies depending on which theory you find most compelling. Maybe it is purgatory. Maybe it is a government experiment. Maybe it is the imagination of a traumatized child. Maybe it is simply the mechanical reality of being characters in an animated television show that has been running for nearly 3 decades. But the feeling of entrapment is constant across every interpretation. What makes these theories so resonant is that the feeling of being trapped is not unique to fictional characters. It is a deeply human experience. We all know what it is like to feel stuck in patterns we cannot break. We all know what it is like to watch the same mistakes repeat in our own lives and the lives of the people we love. We all know what it is like to deliver a lesson that we know is correct and watch it be ignored. We all know the exhaustion of pushing a boulder up a hill that gravity will always reclaim. The theories about South Park persist and grow and attract new believers because they take a cartoon about 4 foul-mouthed kids in Colorado and use it as a mirror for the existential anxieties that define the human condition. The darkness underneath South Park's comedy is not spite, it is recognition. The show recognizes that life often does feel cyclical, that people often do fail to learn, that consequences often do fail to accumulate in the ways we expect, and that the laughter we generate in response to suffering is simultaneously our greatest strength and our most effective form of denial. We laugh at Cartman because laughing at Cartman means we do not have to confront what Cartman represents about the capacity for cruelty in every human community. We laugh at Randy because laughing at Randy means we do not have to confront what Randy represents about the capacity for selfishness in every human heart. We laugh at Kenny's deaths because laughing at Kenny means we do not have to sit with the unbearable truth that suffering can be invisible, that pain can be forgotten, and that the people who need help most are often the people whose cries are muffled by the hoods we force them to wear. The show understands all of this. Trey Parker and Matt Stone have spent over 25 years building a fictional town that operates on the same rules as the real world, just with the volume turned up and the filter removed. The theories are not conspiracies imposed on the show by imaginative fans. They are the show's own logic followed to its conclusions. South Park gives us every piece we need to see the darkness. It simply wraps those pieces in jokes and trusts that some of us will look past the laughter to see what is underneath. And what is underneath is not nihilism. It is not cruelty for cruelty's sake. What is underneath South Park's comedy is the same thing that is underneath all great satire, a desperate, furious, deeply human wish that things could be different. That people could learn, that patterns could break, that the boulder could stay at the top of the hill just once. The show keeps going because that wish keeps going, season after season, even when the evidence suggests it will never be fulfilled. South Park is not a show about people who have given up. It is a show about people who cannot give up, even when giving up would be easier, even when the universe seems designed to make giving up the only rational choice. They keep walking to the bus stop. They keep sitting in Mr. Garrison's classroom. They keep trying in their broken, profane, deeply imperfect way to make sense of a world that refuses to make sense. And maybe that is the real theory, not purgatory, not a time loop, not a government experiment. Maybe the real theory is that South Park is about the stubborn, irrational, magnificent human refusal to stop trying, even in a world that gives us every reason to. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.